Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now, where we dive into all things parenting, motherhood. And today we have a very special guest. I'm joined today by Daryl Sandak. And Daryl's story is a special one. And we love to shine a light on all different types of journeys and experiences. And her son, Shay, has cerebral palsy and autism, which is not something that we've yet touched on the podcast. So it's always very important to me to drive and to provide new perspectives so that there's more awareness of these diseases and more understanding so that we can better show up for each other. So first of all, Daryl, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So Daryl, I'd love, if you don't mind, kind of like walk us through your journey. Typically, I find that people are really curious around how did you know? What were the signs? If you don't mind kind of delving into those details, that's a great place for us to start today.
Totally. So my son was born at 33 weeks. So he came 7 weeks early. It was just kind of like a spontaneous, crazy thing. I had a normal pregnancy, went to the hospital, had a baby an hour later. It was like a nutty out of a movie experience. And then he was in the NICU for about 16 days and he was pretty good there. I wasn't scared about anything. They'd given me the pamphlets. Preemies are at, I think, an 8-fold increase for cerebral palsy. That's definitely something to watch out for with preemies. But he was a good weight. He left the NICU at 5 pounds. He was off breathing. There was nothing indicative of it. And I kind of I'd never read up on prematurity. And then, they gave me the pamphlets, but everything looked good. He was a perfect Gerber baby. He was super sweet, super smiley, super engaged, ate well, no issues at all. And then when he was about 7 months old, when I think is kind of when those first milestones of clapping start, he was clapping like this. And it was the left hand was completely balled into a fist, and then he would put his right hand into his left. And then from there, it's once you see something, you start being not able to unsee it, right? So then it's that kind of clicked. And then I would notice he was only splashing water with his right hand, when he was in the bath and having fun. He was only reaching for toys with his right hand. He was only doing everything with his right hand. And there shouldn't be such a favoritism of handedness at that age. So I had him evaluated by a PT. Well, first I took him to the pediatrician and they said, it's fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. But we got him evaluated with a PT who recommended we see a neurologist. We got an MRI at 8 months old, and that confirmed that he had cerebral palsy, left hemiplegic. And cerebral palsy is a spectrum, right? You can have it could be divided up or lower. It could be divided hemi, left and right. It could involve all of your extremities. It can involve one or two or whatever. So he's left hemiplegic. So it means the left side of his body does not receive the proper signals, and he has some paralysis on the left side of his body. There's a couple other things with cerebral palsy. You could either be very floppy or spastic, so your muscles tense up. And so he kind of postures a little bit with his left hand is just tense on the left side of his body. It doesn't function like the right.
I didn't realize. So CP, what you're saying, cerebral palsy, it can be diagnosed early. It's not like autism where they say, well, we really can't diagnose anything until they're a little bit older. That's what you're saying.
Yes. So I think the absolute soonest that you can really see any of these symptoms is 6 months. We caught it at 7 months. And what will happen is an MRI will confirm it. So you'll want to obviously you go from generalist to specialist, right? It's the typical pathway of these things. So pediatrician, probably a pediatrician should direct you to probably a neurologist or PT, but neurologist will make the final diagnosis.
Daryl, how difficult or not difficult was it for you to accept this diagnosis as reality?
I think when he was a baby, it really wasn't difficult because how everything was explained to us is that the brain is very neuroplastic up until 2. The brain is you have neuroplasticity forever, but like especially from 0 to 2, it's like Play-Doh. And so how it was explained to us is that you can activate other parts of the brain to compensate. And he was a really like happy, engaged baby. So we were kind of told that like, oh, if you do early intervention now, things will be almost imperceptible. So it didn't really like it affected me, but I felt like, okay, we're doing PT, we're doing OT, we're doing everything. And I can't remember what age he started wearing like an SMO when he was young. When he was a baby, we used to bind. It was like so sad to like look at pictures, but like he didn't care. He was a baby, he was smiley. We used to bind his right hand, the hand that he favored, so it would force him to use his left hand. And it worked. It's called constraint therapy, but it worked. So I was very hopeful. I was like, okay, this is just some extra while he's a baby. But growth and development are not linear. And then I think you learn that as you go. Then it got more difficult. I would say like when he was like 2 is like when it got more difficult. Like, I'd be on the playground and other kids were walking and he didn't really walk consistently until after 2. And then he would get tired and start crawling. You don't really see 2-year-olds crawl. So those type of things would start to like feel very jarring in like larger group settings and birthday parties. Like I would start to really see the differences, and the gap kind of just unfortunately widens the older they get.
So it was only until everyone else, like those milestones became more significant. And then, of course, also that's a lot of work for you, right? It's physical to have to
Oh yeah.
carry, and I'd imagine that's exhausting, correct?
So my son is like 38 pounds now, and I am like a beast with like carrying him. It's like insane. I would flex my muscles if I was wearing a tank top, but like it's crazy because he does need so much more like carrying or helping, and it's so much more physical. It's so much more like getting on the floor, helping him in a chair, helping him out of a chair, helping him climb upstairs, squatting down, lifting him up. So it's very physical.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. So talk to me also about, you and your husband, you understand, you come to terms with this diagnosis. How did you kind of seek community? Were you looking for other parents that were like y'all? Were you kind of like, we've got this? How did you begin to cope? How did you begin to support each other and through this journey?
I think I made like some critical mistakes because I don't think I sought anything. I think that I was like, I don't know if it's like half denial or whatever, but I was like, okay, I got this. Like, I'm doing what I have to do. Like, I have all the practitioners like in my phone, and that's like all I need. And I think that like I didn't really seek any sort of community. But like now that he's 4 and I've long since realized like typical rules and typical parenting strategies, it's not applicable. And once I kind of got that through my head, that became a lot better for me.
So have you felt the shift in how you surround yourself now, or do you feel like you're just more at terms with it, like like inside, like internally, you've just accepted this and realized that Shay is a wonderful kid and his life is going to look different than maybe his peers?
Like I still have moments for sure. But yeah, I think that like if I look at like our friend group, mom group, whatever, he is with like able-bodied neurotypical kids.
Mm.
He does not have, and this isn't a function of anything. I actually think I only have one mom friend who's going through not even anything similar, that's just in this broad boat? So it's like a hard question. I think that I've stopped comparing. I've stopped comparing, and everybody in my orbit is very understanding and supportive, and I've gotten a lot better with like, nope, like that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for my kid. We're on a different rule book, playbook. We're just on a different we're on a different field. It's not one and the same.
I think there's a lot of trepidation for people when they're interacting with a child, or really anybody, but in this particular case, we'll focus on a child with a disease that people don't understand.
Yeah.
Right? So cerebral palsy, I would say it's relatively common, but it's something you've heard of, but not everyone understands how it works.
Mhm.
If kind of like in your friend group and like
Yeah.
wanting to like show up for Shay and really like try your best, what's like the best way to actually to do that so that he knows and that that you are putting forth your best effort to interact?
I think just like I like when people ask me questions from like a place of like wanting to understand and learn. Like there is nothing there. What I don't like and what makes you feel isolated is, and I understand this. This is some people get uncomfortable. So there's like a tendency to minimize or like rationalize in their own head. We all hear like people that are autistic, oh, everyone's on the spectrum. Okay, yeah, maybe a lot more people are self-diagnosing and being diagnosed, but it doesn't mean that that's taking anything away from the high support needs that my son has. So it feels very invalidating, and I really, really don't like that. But I enjoy when my friends, especially parents, really try to understand, and not just from a place of like, you can tell when someone's just fear-based and they just don't want it to happen to their kid, or when they actually are trying to understand what goes into it. Like, what does this kid face every day? Like, what do you face every day? That's very interesting to me, and I never have any issues talking about that. Like, disabled is not a dirty word in my house and in my vocabulary. Like, if you meet me for more than 30 minutes or whatever, we're having a drink or we're like talking about life, like you'll know I have a disabled child. It's a part of my life, and it's not a dirty word, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And it's nothing for him to be ashamed of. Like, I was with my friend the other day, and her son, how old's her son? Like 3, was like, why does he walk like that? And she and I looked at each other. She's great. And I was like, when he came out of my belly, his foot got hurt and his boo-boo never healed. Boom. It was like, okay. And they like went back to playing. Like, that's how easy it could be. And it's not like like, it's not a dirty word. It's okay.
These things happen. They happen far more commonly than people may recognize. And by the way, what the beauty of a kid is, they're going to say exactly what's on their mind, but they're not saying it from a place of
No.
to be rude. They're not trying to be rude. They're not trying to be disrespectful. They're being honest.
And the explanation, you could see his light bulb went off and he was like, okay, like, boom, done. It was like,
Well, but it's almost like, don't you wish more moms and adults kind of took that same approach of like, hey, I don't know this, or I've never seen this before. Can you explain it to me? Versus being so afraid of what they're seeing in front of them that they don't say anything, which creates, I'm gonna imagine, just a degree of awkwardness where now you don't really even want to be there because you can tell that they're processing what they're seeing in front of them.
yeah. And I do think that there's like, unfortunately, like a degree of ableism too, where I can just tell that maybe certain parents don't love that he's in their class or anything like that. Like, I almost think it's like going to rub off on them. And that's a function of your own parenting. Like, what's going to rub off? Like, can't you use this as like a teachable moment? Like, my friend's 3-year-old son, like, boom, it was no thing but the fear or the worry that like somehow that's going to bring your child down to be associated is really sad. That's pretty sad.
Wow, that's an interesting take. I haven't heard anything like that before.
Yeah. That I see sometimes, in very subtle ways. I'm just very attuned to it.
Yeah. How have you had to advocate for him? Um, you alluded earlier that your pediatrician at first kind of brushed it off. Everything's fine. I'm sure that was kind of like the beginning of learning that your journey, his journey, and really just how you were going to interact with the medical field was going to be different. Can you explain a little bit more of how you've had to advocate for him?
So I think what I'm learning about the medical field is the system is flawed. We know this with like insurance and practitioners, and it's too bad. People should be able to practice their craft and not worry about paperwork. What I've noticed, like in the medical community, you have to be your best advocate. Because if you take like a bird's eye view, you're in a room with a doctor for 20 minutes. They don't see what you see every day. You know your child best, and you have to say it, and you have to make suggestions and not be shy. Like I went to a doctor yesterday, and she was like, "Oh, like his AFO fits. He wears his AFO." I'm like, "Yeah." And then I'm like, "Hang on a minute." I'm like, "Can we put it on him so you could see how it fits, so you can make a determination on like what's going on here?" And it's not a fault of her. She's going to take me at my word if I say the AFO fits, that she's not going to put it on and like see.
Yeah.
But it was like, you have to push. You just have to push that one step further. And we determined that it actually wasn't fitting correctly. So I get that she's going to take me at my word. She trusts me. I trust her. But you have to push a little deeper on every single thing, like every medication that's written. Okay, well, what are the side effects? What can I expect? What's short term? What's long term? What's the research on it? Like every single thing. It's not like when you go to the doctor in your 20s and you're just like, "Oh, okay, bye,
Yeah.
hi, bye." You just have
Yeah.
to push, and you have to push insurance companies because they expect you to give up. That's their play.
Right. Just wear you out, exhaust you until you ultimately.
Right. And you start to do a cost benefit of like, okay, is this worth my time? And that's the frustrating thing about insurance, and that's their whole MO.
Daryl, what's the future look like for Shay? What do you anticipate his journey looking like? Even maybe not in the next, 20, 30 years, but in the next 5 to 10 years.
I don't know. And I think that like that has been the biggest thing to wrap my head around, because everything has gone a little bit off what we thought. We thought it was going to be imperceptible, only physical. Then, oh, maybe he has some speech delay. Oh, no, it's not speech delay. Oh, maybe he has autistic traits. No, he doesn't have autism, just some this. And it's changed every 6 months. So I just have really gotten to a place and a concept of like, development is not linear. None of this is linear. It's all in process, and you just have to like really start to get okay with the process. So what do I hope it looks like in 5 years? I hope that he, goes to a little bit more of a specialized supportive school and then gets mainstreamed. He should have a tendon lengthening surgery that will help his gait tremendously. So I'm hoping that all of those things, dovetail, and he starts to present and function very high level. That's my hope, but I've learned not to get like married to anything.
Yeah, and your whole energy and disposition is such that I find quite endearing. Like you seem to actually have accepted like the realities of the unpredictability of the journey that you're on in a way that I think a lot of moms, particularly those that are medical moms, rare disease types. One of the things I hear the most often is it's so hard to be present because you're always concerned about the next thing.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you've found a way to at least try to stay grounded in the moment that you're in, and kind of accepted the fact that it's just going to be different every 6 months, and we can only hope that it's different in kind of in the best way, not in kind of in a step backwards or quote negative way.
I have gotten to that place, but it took me 4 years to get to that place. So I want to be like so honest about that, because like now I'm kind of like, okay. And I would say almost like my husband is like 6 months behind me. He's like not there yet. He's getting there. So it's a process, and it's okay to be in process. Like, these are extraordinary circumstances. Um, these are extraordinary circumstances for any parent going through it. And I think, like, what you just have to keep in mind is, like, if you're still half standing, that means that you get up every day and you do hard things. And it's like, okay, I get up every day and I do hard things. What's more? One more hard thing. I already have been doing it for X amount of time. Um, but it took a while. It took a while to get there.
Well, Daryl, I'm so grateful for your time. Again, I think cerebral palsy, as I've learned, it's one of the more common, rare diseases, and I think it's important to shine a light on it because it can look different. It can present differently than people might realize, which I think is also super important. So I think there's a lot of important takeaways from this conversation, not the least of which is not to be afraid to ask questions because it shows that you care. And I think as someone who cares very deeply about supporting others, I think oftentimes the thing to do is the simplest, which is just to be curious in a very empathetic way. No one will be offended by a question so long as you're seeking to understand. And I think you are really kind of reinforcing that here on this call. So I really appreciate it. And as a final note for our listeners, this is part of why we built Support Now. We built Support Now for moms like Daryl that are seeking both opportunities for grants for those pesky insurance companies that don't cover everything. And we also built it on the registry side so that you can rally your community to do outside fundraising, meals around the house and updates. So if you know someone that is going through something similar to Daryl, we encourage you to take a look at supportnow.org. And Daryl, thank you so much for sharing more about your beautiful boy. And I look forward to many, many more future conversations with you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.